Today, we'll start with media. Our local media scene continues to shift with a TV station in Medford that long identified itself as the news leader, dropping local news broadcasts. That's one item we'll get to in this month's edition of our media segment, Signals and Noise. Our regular guests are here. Christopher Lucas is an assistant professor of communications and media and cinema program at Southern Oregon University. Hi, Chris.
Good morning.
Jessie Kretzer-Hartenstein is back with us as well, assistant professor of journalism and mass communication at Cal Poly Humboldt. Welcome back, Jessie.
Hi there.
So before we get to the local angle, let's talk about the CNN town hall event with Donald Trump in New Hampshire in front of a partisan crowd. The criticism has been long and loud of CNN for the event. The guy is running for president. What are the issues here that you see, Jessie?
Oh, so many. So I think something that has been talked about in news media a little bit, but maybe not enough surrounding all of this, is that, giving the voice straight to someone who obviously says lots of things that maybe aren't true, can be sort of problematic for viewers and for our nation, really. And that's it's hard when there's not enough context given. Obviously, the moderator kind of jumped in and cut him off a few times, but that's something that we're seeing more and more of with the current news cycles and the fact that people are getting their news from, clips on social media without the context. And so it's really just, it's basically giving a voice and giving more coverage to the same things that have been causing problems for years now with Trump of, him sort of spreading false information. So that's one of the problems. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there for the moment.
Let's let Chris get in a take in here too.
I would want to maybe jump off of the point Jessie raised about clips on social media. I think, one of the dynamics here that's a little underexamined is, just the current struggles of cable news in particular, but also just cable as an industry, which is really in free fall. The number of people, cord cutting is increasing. The subscriber base is down to something like 40% of what it was just a couple of years ago. It's happening really fast. And so if you realize that audience is smaller, also, cable news is already a fraction of that audience. So outlets like CNN are just sort of struggling for relevance and for, kind of staying in this conversation. And so when I look at events like this, I see, in some ways, it feels like a desperate grab for attention, and the audience for that event, for the town hall, was around 3 million, which is 5 or 6 times larger than its typical evening audience. So mission accomplished there, I suppose. But I see these programs in many ways as the top of a waterfall, a cascade of material that people have different agendas for, right? So obviously, politically, these candidates, they now have a lot of content to push out to their followers, and CNN has content to push out onto its other platforms where it's trying to gain more relevance.
Okay. So yeah, different kinds of motivations here. Obviously, Trump wants to get on TV. Live TV is great because he can't get fact-checked, but that presents an issue for the cable operator in this case, or the cable network, CNN, which is putting him on unfiltered.
And I think there's kind of I've heard a few defenses of CNN which feel a little bit like false equivalency to me, where they're saying, well, listen, they'll give a town hall to anybody who wants to come on, and certainly President Biden will get a town hall. And I think that's a little bit of a simplistic view, because when Trump, who is really insulted and denigrated CNN for years, agrees to go on that network, it's really billed as this kind of like heavyweight fight. It's almost more of a sporting event than a news event. The media critic John Alsop wrote, I thought really smartly, that night CNN was not covering the news, but they were making the news, and in some ways it was more about CNN than even about Trump.
Mm-hmm. Final thoughts there, Jessie?
Yeah, I appreciate that Chris pointed out, that this was obviously kind of CNN orchestrating it. But it's noteworthy that in the days following, CNN's viewership and ratings actually went down significantly. So, for the actual town hall event, it boosted their ratings, but it doesn't look like that's actually having the positive effect that they were looking for. Obviously, they're kind of trying to move to more of a neutral position in, having coverage and having viewers that are from the right and not just the left, but it doesn't seem to be working in their favor. And I think it's kind of noteworthy since, they do need to make money. They are for profit. This is what they're doing, whether they're creating the news or covering the news. That's how they're trying to stay in business, and it might not work the way that they were hoping it would.
I think the winner was MSNBC.
Apparently so, yes. Anybody who didn't care could talk about it later on. This is Signals and Noise on the Jefferson Exchange. Jessie Kretzer-Hartenstein is an assistant professor and PR guru at Cal Poly Humboldt. Chris Lucas is assistant professor and program coordinator of digital cinema at Southern Oregon University. If you have some input to the conversation, join us at jx@jeffnet.org. We're taking emails at jx@jeffnet.org. Let's go to the event we billboarded at the top, which is the changing local news scene once again. So the CBS affiliate in Medford, KTVL, which long identified itself as the news leader and had the ratings to back it up for a long time, opted to drop its local newscasts a couple of weeks ago. Sinclair owns the station. Sinclair now, instead of a local news, offers a national newscast with local segments. Oddly enough, that the local broadcasts had been coming out of the same building in Medford as the Mail Tribune, which is the newspaper that went out of business in January. So there's the whole Medford situation, media situation. Then also the Oregonian put out a lengthy article this week about the difference in the Register Guard in Eugene, long one of the major respected newspapers in Oregon, getting gutted by the Gannett chain and is down to 6 staffers in Eugene, no local editor. They have to call the folks in Salem and say, what should we be doing today? So big changes on the local media scene that continue to happen. Initial thoughts here, Chris?
Yeah, this has been on our agenda a lot of times on this segment just because it's a long time trend and really troubling. The new wrinkle here to me is, we've talked about ghost newspapers before, and this may be the first time I really have heard or noticed a ghost news station in the broadcast area. This idea of a ghost news is where there's a news outlet that continues in its name, but then the quality and quantity and scope and scale of its editorial coverage just starts to slope off, right? And this usually comes from a couple of directions. Maybe a corporate owner takes over from elsewhere and just starts, sort of shrinking that and turning it more into an advertising platform than a news platform. Or just to save money, they start shrinking the newsroom because those are expensive operations. So those are kind of the two ways that these, and I think we're seeing them both. We've seen them both in this region, and it's we're coming to a point. I'll stop there, but I think we're going to need to start thinking of some new models to get local news covered.
Well, and there are some already that we can talk about, like Ashland.news. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to get Jessie's take on, and you've watched this as well in the Humboldt Bay area with the Humboldt State Station going out of business.
Yeah. Our NPR station is not doing any. I shouldn't say not doing any. Doing very, very, very little local news, and I wouldn't even call it news really. What they are doing locally. Huge loss down here for that, and we've definitely seen a lot of the same things happening. And it's kind of a similar model in that, it's, as Chris was saying, it's these, larger corporations kind of absorbing and buying up the local news channels and local newspapers and things like that, and then just slashing and burning the actual editorial staff. Though I did see with KTVL, apparently Sinclair is going to bring in one reporter eventually to cover Southern Oregon, which just, it blows my mind that that's the consolation prize, that they might have eventually one reporter, as though one reporter can actually, cover all of the important local news that's happening in Southern Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. And yet that is sort of being touted as this consolation prize. There will be some local, and some is better than none, but I think it kind of masks the larger problem and sort of just puts a Band-Aid on it. And as we know, people need their local news. And I think finding those other ways to get the information, as Chris mentioned, is going to be more and more important. The ways that we actually gather it and receive it as the public, but also different channels, that reporters or media outlets can be utilizing to get the information to the local populations.
Yeah, we were talking to Jessie Kretzer-Hartenstein from Cal Poly Humboldt and Chris Lucas from Southern Oregon University in our regular feature called Signals and Noise, where we're talking about the local media market. You can join us on the exchange, not just the local media market, but media matters generally. Join us at jx@jeffnet.org. While we were talking, Jessie, I went to KTVL's website. It still refers to itself as News 10, and the only local item from Saturday is identified as by news staff. Chris, you were talking about models. We touched on Ashland.News, which set up to take the sort of psychic space that the Ashland Daily Tidings once occupied, which was also owned by the Mail Tribune, also taken offline several years ago. And some of the same people are involved in that operation, as some of the same people from Mail Tribune are involved in the Rogue Valley Times now. So some alternatives have certainly popped up fairly quickly.
I think the Rogue Valley Times is a great addition. It's an interesting model because it's more regionally based, right? It's still ownership from outside, and then there's a variety of nonprofit or non-commercial models popping up. There's a group out of the University of Oregon called the Agora Project, and a couple of professors run that.
Mm-hmm. They've been on there.
Yeah, they've been to the region a couple times, and they're talking through a lot of really interesting models, things like building community infrastructures for people to kind of come together and collect information and get reliable information out, sort of almost like sort of civic groups or civic communities, especially for some of those more routine kinds of information that are really important, like the city council meetings and the school board meetings and some of these kinds of lower level stories that the local news would cover, but it's hard to sort of make money doing that.
Well, and plus, in a world of doom scrolling, Jessie, I mean, are we really in tune with things like when the Water Commission meets to decide on rates and things like that?
Most people are not, and that's a fair point. Though I think when the information is out there, if it's actually going to be affecting people, people who want to be informed are going to pay attention to that. And we have down here. Actually, I'll slightly change the subject, but we have the Lost Coast Outpost, which is an fully online news site. That's kind of cheeky and fun as well. But they're starting to use AI to cover stories that are specifically, about things like the city council meeting. Rather than sending one of their journalists over to the meeting, they're just looking at the agenda, having AI generate a story. They're saying, right at the top of the screen that this is AI generated. But, and I know lots of people have mixed feelings about that. Though I think it's kind of brilliant as a way to keep local journalism alive, because now their reporters and their journalists don't have to necessarily sit at the city council meeting. They can be out covering breaking news, or, they can go gather the facts from a breaking news story, pop the facts into a chat bot to write the story so that they can move on to the next one. As long as there's editors looking at this stuff and it's not just putting it out there, I think there is, some value in that as far as keeping local journalism alive.
Wow, AI at the Lost Coast Outpost. We'll have to look into that a little further. Okay. Let's do it the pick threes. We only have 2 minutes for this. Chris, go first.
Oh, gosh. I will say I've been watching Silo, which was on Apple TV, which is a dystopian series about this group kind of stuck in a bunker. They don't know how or why they're there. It's pretty interesting. I wanted to plug the Student Film Festival from SOU that's going to be coming up. There's one screening on June 7th at the Varsity, but also another, we hope, on the 14th of June, which would be kind of more for the community at large and selling tickets through the Varsity website. That's about 100 minutes of short films from SOU students. Okay. So that'll be a good time. And then the third one's a little odd, but the U.S. Surgeon General dropped an advisory yesterday on social media and the youth and sort of mental health among youth. It's a short read, but well worth checking out.
Okay, we'll provide links to all those. Jessie, what's your three in the 45 seconds we have?
All right, so we have the kinetic sculpture race coming up down here,
yes.
which is super exciting. And KRFH, our student-run radio station, will actually be covering that with play-by-play out on the scene. So be sure to tune into that Memorial Day weekend. And then a fun one, Whitney Cummings. She's a comedian with a couple of Netflix specials that are super hilarious. And I'm really excited because she's going to be coming to town, and I get to see her on Friday. But check out her Netflix specials. Those are fun. And then the Huberman Lab podcast is one to definitely listen to. It's about science and science-based tools for everyday life. And Andrew Huberman, who hosts it, he's a neuroscientist from Stanford University. Super smart guy.
All right, Jessie and Christopher at Signals and Noise, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is JPR.